James Gunn is not the guy to make this movie, all right? For all of his talents and all of his skill at making things line up with 70s rock music, it's really not his arena to take on an aspirational superhero. Superman is not a character that fits into how James Gunn sees superheroes, okay? Now, you see here it's being compared to Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman series, all right? Now, the All-Star Superman series revolves around Superman being in a self-sacrifice, doing this for humanity before he dies scenario. Okay. Now, again, that doesn't sound bad. That doesn't sound awful, right? Well, considering that this is supposed to be the first outing for this Superman character played by David Cornwell, this is not a good sign. If Superman is going out there and sort of being at his last end here. Now, this isn't a desperation thing that happens in the All-Star series. Let me make that clear. Superman is very much overpowered for Superman even, so he's not running into things that he's like having a very difficult time with. In fact, I think it's not till the end when he has to fight Solaris that things are getting a little difficult for him. But even then, he overpowers Solaris and is able to handle things. Even Luthor at his Superman superpowered up state isn't enough to take him on. The situation that you find yourself, though, as you start to bring in this kind of dynamic into the first introduction of this kind of character, you are really setting the bar pretty high, okay? This is the problem with modern writers in Superman. Is a lot of them think that he has to be this badass, or he has to be some kind of character that is so out of step with everybody else. As we heard with James Gunn himself describing, this Superman is a Superman that doesn't believe in killing. However, he lives in a world where superheroes are killing criminals. And so he has this moral dilemma with them over what to do about these people who are intent on using their super abilities, metahumans, if you are a DC fan like I am, what you're going to do about these metahumans that are going around and obliterating whole parts of the world with their metahuman abilities. All right? Hold it. It looks like 73% of you watching this aren't subscribed. Time to click that button. You know where to find it. So the biggest problem that James Gunn has with this is he has a clown car of superheroes that he's trying to introduce all at once. Now, I would know a thing or two about that because I did produce my own comic book. That's right. This is the Colossals right here. These superheroes right here were in a book that I put together. You can see it's real. I like the black and white version because I grew up with manga. But as you can see right here, it's real, true and blue, right? And so I addressed the problems that James Gunn is running into in this book right here. In just 24 pages, I introduced you to 7 superheroes, one of which isn't even part of this team. He's the adopted son of this superhero right here. I didn't realize that wasn't on camera, sorry. He's the adopted son of this superhero right here, Star Supreme, right? Now you might notice Star Supreme has a big old S on her chest. And that's right, she's inspired by Superman, an aspirational superhero. Now, again, what I'm drawing the attention to that wording is for this purpose is that when you create an aspirational superhero, their challenges cannot be in the physical realm. You are not creating a hero with the intent of trying to show off how powerful they are to prove a point. That is not the case at all. It never works out that way, and in fact, it seems kind of goofy to do so. Even things like Dragon Ball Z with all the screaming and the power leveling and it's over 9,000, the core crux of that story always shifts back and forth between what the role of a protector and what the role of a villain is and how risky it is and how people can be left behind. They're very complex mechanisms in what inspires these villains and these heroes to get into these conflicts, even over there in the East in Dragon Ball Z, where things seem kind of, oh, you're the bad guy because you've got all the sharp and pointy things on you, so we've got to punch you, that kind of mentality. And that's perfectly fine, right? That works over here, too. We've got all of the young people that are very interested in manga for those qualities. But what I want to bring your attention back to is that phrasing, aspirational superhero. Okay? The aspirational superhero is not like any superhero that James Gunn has ever created. All right, or ever interpreted, let's put it that way, ever interpreted. When you look at the Guardians are a found family. And when he took over the Suicide Squad, he constructed that in a very similar manner, in that these people were not necessarily fitting well together, but they had made up sort of an uncomfortable Thanksgiving dinner ensemble of people who may not necessarily have found each other without the Suicide Squad, without the Guardians of the Galaxy interfering and bringing these people together. So again, that's perfectly fine. Superheroes come together from different backgrounds, but James Gunn's spirit behind that is always with the characters who are punkish. These are characters that are out of line with society, outsiders, anti-heroes. These are characters that don't fit into the aspirational quality because much like Superman, Star Supreme, as I created her, did not end up thrust into being a superhero. She made the decision to put her identity on the line and introduce herself to the world and her abilities on a fine day when the California quake let go there. I call it the caliclism in my story. I'm sorry, I'm tripping over it. I call it the caliclism in my story, and that's where everything from Route 5 to the Pacific Ocean in California fell into the ocean. That's right. Over like 20 million people die in one instance, and she's the only one that stops tsunamis and ends up rescuing about 4,000 people personally over the course of 2 days. Now, this is a hero that just sacrificed her time and her safety, didn't know that she was capable of stopping a tsunami, but tried anyway and was successful, right? So, again, this is that kind of mentality behind this that a person will choose with no like reward at the end, no threat telling them to do this, nothing that would otherwise interfere with the deep and value driven choice to help people. And much like Superman's character went out to inspire the world, so too did Star Supreme. In my setting, her heroism brings these characters together. One of them is her adopted son. He's flying up in the air, and the other is her adopted daughter. That's the one with the hood on. Her cousin. Her parents are black. They adopted her. They're homesteaders up here in Maine, where I live. And her cousin right there with the visor on. That's her cousin. One of her friends right here is a bounty hunter for the devil. She met the lady with the flaming head down in the Amazon jungle when the Amazonians, isolated from the world, one of these isolated tribes, believed that she was a sun goddess and tried to have her fight gold diggers that had showed up to destroy their tribal lands that her people lived on. That didn't go so well. And finally, there's an immortal sorceress here. And I introduce all of these characters in 24 pages. All right. And it's a very gentle introduction, very simplistic. There's nothing, you don't know these characters' parents, you don't know their lineage, but you understand who they are at their core. You know their names, and you get a demonstration of just some of what their power set is, some of how their powers at least manifest physically. Now, James Gunn wants to run at you with all these heroes you may have heard of, or maybe not have heard of. And the biggest issue with that is that you have to start people low and slow on that stuff. A lot of people don't know who Guy Gardner is, just like they don't know who these superheroes that I created are. And so that's why I went through the painstaking process. As you can see, I'll go right through here and just show you guys. I am introducing my heroes as symbols of peace. They are fighting giant shark monsters in order to make sure that this conflict is very simple for you, the reader, to interpret. So you're not getting bogged down in the morality of my heroes and trying to understand where they spend their Saturday nights. Instead, you're seeing them fight giant shark monsters that are destroying an Olympic level event. It's very simple, so you understand immediately how these characters form a team around one another, who calls the shots, and what their blind spots are as they're emerging as a team together. This is all something you can do with 24 pages. All right, this is comic book pages, by the way. So you break that down into storyboards for a movie. Well, guess what? That's probably only like 10 minutes of a movie. That's 10 minutes of your movie, James Gunn, where Superman, as you already have, a giant kaiju showing up, destroying Metropolis. You just have that character attract a bunch of superheroes around. You could show who all these people are very simply. You don't have to have this cluttered up mess where Superman is in this situation where he's being compared to Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman. I'm not trying to detract from that. You have to understand where I come from. This is my Superman. Dean Cain portrayed the Superman that I know and love. Now, again, Donner's Superman there with Christopher Reeves, very talented actor, very good, set the tone, in fact, for how Dean Cain showed up as Superman in the 90s. However, I didn't grow up with that. I didn't find the Donner movies until I was like 11 or 12 years old. It's not that my parents hid them from me. It was just something that just never came across my purview. I was too busy with other things, like the comic books. The situation that found me was that I was a little kid up in northern Maine. That's where I come from, way up in northern Maine, up on the border of Canada. There was a comic book shop in the store that I grew up in back when, a 5, 6-year-old could walk around, walk around a town by himself and nobody was going to scoop him up and run away with him. And someone very close to me was taken away, and I was very bummed out. And so I just kind of did what kids do, and I walked around trying to think through like how my little kid brain was going to process not having this person anymore. And I walked into the Shiretown Comics and Hobbies shop and met Ernie. He was a pudgy fella, and he ran the shop there. A bunch of trading cards, models, comic books. And up on the ceiling, above my head, was Superman. And Superman was in this very unique pose. It was obviously meant to be on the roof of comic book shops, but he had his arm up, stretched out like this, and he was looking down at you and he was winking like this. And I remember that I was very depressed and I was very sad and I was kind of moping around in there. And Ernie caught my attention and he said, "Hey, have you met my friend Superman?" And that was the first time that I had ever like seen Superman in any other form than just on television. And the comics from that point on became my focus for a very long time. And that was the old style comics too, because that's what Ernie had. He didn't have like that fresh, weird stuff in the 90s where they again had lost what Superman was and were trying to kill him. This was stuff in like the 50s and 60s and 70s, the early part of Superman. And in fact, he let me touch what I thought at the time, he let me read what I thought at the time was a first edition Action Comics. And I've been told later on that that might have been a reproduction. So either way, what happened was, though, is that he reached up to the top shelf and found this dusty Superman book, right? I remember it in my mind, like a top shelf. It was all dust covered, and he cleared off this plastic case to it, this plastic envelope, and he pulled that out, pulled it out of the sleeve, and there it is, the Action Comics. He let my little peanut butter stained fingers flip through that book on the floor of his comic book shop, and that's where I met Superman. And for the next 2 years, I spent my days, anytime I could get into town, down on the floor of that comic book shop reading every last Superman comic that man had in his inventory and his collection. And that's how I know Superman. Superman was introduced to me at a time in my life when it was very, very low. Was very a young kid going through quite a bit of change, all right? And you had Dean Cain Superman. Dean Cain Superman wasn't out here to prove anything. He wasn't a Superman that lectured to society. He lectured to individuals, individuals that had strayed from a very easy to follow path of light, you see? Very easy to follow morality. And Superman, again, did not exert his power here. This was not a story about how strong Superman was. This is a story about how Superman used his morality to get through to villains, to people who had fallen out of society, who perhaps felt that they were left behind by society. And so this is how I understand Superman and why I don't believe that James Gunn is going to be able to handle this. And let me break it down something very simple, right? Very, very clear, concise, very easy to understand situation. I created this motto for Star Supreme, and it encapsulates what Superman is for me, okay? The line is, "Save everyone you can. Not one more, not one less." Now I know dying in the line of duty is very heroic, but I believe that a superhero should make it home for dinner. This is a fictional world. It's perfectly fine to have the superhero be able to cross their T's and dot their I's before 5 p.m. That's fine. To have a superhero, especially a supermom, home to be with her children and to put her children to bed at night. That's an important thing because that's how I know Superman. Clark isn't the guy that's, like cold cocking Mogul into the next galaxy. That's not who Superman is in my mind. He's not a guy that punches a hole in reality. He's not a guy that laser visions Lex Luthor's face off or something like that. He's not that guy. Superman is Clark Kent to me. I understand the dynamic that they exist in because that's how I understand Superman. I know Clark first. And that character is the character that goes home. This is what I love about him. He goes home to the Kent farm and he uses a hammer and nails to put up the fencing for the cattle. He climbs up a ladder to put the shingles on the barn. He is milking the cows at regular speed, not super speed. He's not using his x-ray vision to look at any of the crops to make sure that they're healthy. He's simply sitting on a fence post watching the sunrise over the cornfields. And that's what I love about Superman. Yeah, it's really cool to see him, like, pick up an oil tanker and pitch it up to the moon and do all this crazy battling stuff, that's fun. But what really keeps me coming back to that character, or did until, like I said, people don't know how to write him anymore, was the fact that he was trying desperately to be a human, to be a man, to understand mortality. I wanted to say morality, to understand mortality. And this is what made Superman invaluable to me, is that rather than going out and ruling over the world or having extravagant parties or brooding in a cave somewhere, Superman went back to a farm and he toiled away the way that a man does, not a god. Hammer and nails, pounding those fence posts in, hours at a time, when he could do it in just seconds. And that's a Superman that will not find his way into James Gunn's movie. The Superman we'll see is a very generous man. He's very kind. He wants to take care of society, but he behaves more like a kid trying to get extra credit on his diploma for graduation than he is a hero. And that's what you're going to see. You're going to see a guy that's like jumping in front of things, trying to put himself in harm's way, because this is what James Gunn sees as aspirational, as self-sacrifice, when you quite literally jump in front of every bullet, shot. And that can't work. That's not going to work. Like I said, the superhero that wins the day is the superhero that has an aspirational message. Be be a human being that lends more to the world than they take. And that's ultimately what Superman's message is. When you peel back who Superman is at the core of the identity of that character, Superman is very simply a man that intends to give more to the world than he takes. So I ask that you think about that going forward. I ask that you know, concentrate, if you will, on these promotions coming out, thinking through just, is this the Superman that you want to invest your time in? Because very simply, you could send a message to James Gunn by not seeing this movie. I don't think I'm going to. I'm very upset, honestly, with it. The trailer really upset me seeing Superman bloodied up like that, the first scene of it. I absolutely don't like that at all. I get what he was trying to do. I wanted to believe that it had some drama to it, but it's just not. You should not be showing Superman bloodied up like that. That's not aspirational. That's a character that was obliterated and then fighting to prove that they're worth again, and that's not Superman. Superman doesn't have that. He has the immovable morality, if you will. He's right, but he will, in the beginning, it may not seem that way, but in the end, he will be proven right. And it's not that he's cocky about it. He himself may doubt that, but in the end, he will be proven right. And that's the purpose of Superman, is he has the superior morality. He's supposed to lead us places, not be victim of the time that he's in. And that's why he's a timeless hero. That's why in my opinion, he's threadbare. He needs to, be retired. They need to put him in a vault with Song of the South for 50 years. Give him a rest. People are a little wore out on the mighty red S, if you will. Okay? Big blue. And I say this as a Superman fan. I honestly think that this character needs to be retired. He needs to be, let rest. He's almost 100 years old, and I can't remember a time apart from his death where he was out of print, if you will. That's quite a lot of adventures. He's done everything 3 times, guys, okay? It's not that James Gunn is, like, lazying this up. Superman is a very difficult character to communicate in the modern era. And frankly, I just don't think that James Gunn has the raw talent to be able to do this. He's much more suited for characters that are anti-heroes, for characters that are kind of stumbling their way through heroism in a comedic fashion, not a person that has made the decision that they will die for another human being. That's just not it's just not something that finds its way into the fiction that James Gunn is known for. But you'll have to let me know what you think down in the comments below. And as always, guys, good luck out there.